Everything look okay on screen? Okay.
Yep, I think it looks good.
All right. You ready?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Three, two, one. Hey everyone, it's Adam Rittenberg and Kyle Bonagura, co-hosts of the Unforgotten Season 3, Finding Dolores Wulff. First of all, I wanted to thank everyone for your support. Last week was an incredible week for the podcast, especially on Apple Podcasts, but certainly really grateful for everyone that is listening and subscribing and rating and sharing. Please continue to do so as we finish up here with the last few episodes. So today we're going to break down 41 Years, which was episode 7, came out on Monday. And this is a big one, Kyle, as obviously there is finally a resolution to this missing persons case. Jane Doe 16, who was a unidentified remains of a woman was found in the San Francisco Bay just a few weeks after Dolores went missing. We learn about that. We learn about Kenny Hart, the detective from the Benicia Police Department, who we introduced at the very top of the podcast. His was one of the first voices that you heard. But in this episode, he really takes us through his process of how he first learned about Jane Doe 16, what he did then, and really how this case, especially for a veteran detective who's more in a supervisory role at this point in his career, it took over his life and it became his life. And I think you and I will never forget the first time that we interviewed Kenny on Zoom back in 2020, and seeing kind of the board that he has behind him, which had a number of pictures, including a picture of Dolores Wulff. So this is a big deal episode. Was certainly Kenny and his process leading up to the identification piece. But when you think back to Kenny and what he did and how he got interested in this, and all the different things that he did to ultimately make it a reality for this family, what strikes you the most?
It was how quickly he became invested in a case that really didn't seem like the chances of solving it were very good, right? He gets a call from a neighboring, well, it was Solano County Sheriff's Department, who was relaying a tip from the Doe Network about it, just some random theory from someone on the internet, right? That this Jane Doe body that was found in Benicia 41 years earlier might be the victim of a serial killer who lived out in Modesto. It all could have seemed like such a stretch, and when you kind of are prioritizing your job as a detective, as they all have to do, in Kenny's case, a supervisor of the detectives in Benicia, like how do you allocate your time? How do you allocate your resources? And so for him to dive in as quickly as he did was, really admirable that he was willing to kind of go down that path and see where it led him. And not only that, there were a significant amount of roadblocks right from the start. The fact that Benicia PD had inadvertently gotten rid of the case file, he could have stopped after that and have been like, well, without that, it's going to be really hard to move forward. And then he, kind of remembers that maybe the coroner's office has some information. He tracks down those documents, and still there wasn't a whole lot to go on, right? It was a shot in the dark, but it was a shot he was willing to take, even though it didn't go down the path that was originally theorized. And so, yeah, if you're listening to this, you've certainly had a chance to listen to the full episode. So for me, it was, that willingness to do the work was really cool to hear about. And then just, from a procedural standpoint, all the steps he took along the way were fascinating to learn about. And I came away just really impressed with his devotion to the job and interested in that sort of police work. So, I had Kenny over at my house for a few hours several months ago to go over this in detail. We've, stayed in touch throughout this process. He's been really helpful for us to make sure that we understand everything as best we can. And so, yeah, thanks to Kenny for making this possible, because we certainly wouldn't have been able to understand the case as well as we do if it hadn't been for his willingness to participate and be so open about his process.
Right, and again, I think it needs to be stated again that this is a case that impacted him maybe like none other in his career. Is a guy that is part of all sorts of cases, a lot of dark things that he saw in his career. As he noted in the episode, a lot of these big calls that he makes or he's made in his career have been bad news. And he was able to make a call that again changed a family's life forever, as he poignantly states at that in that one juncture. So yeah, I mean, I think again, just seeing the relationship that he now has with Paul and the family. We'll get into that a little bit later on in the podcast. But his involvement certainly stood out to me. How even his then girlfriend or fiance and now wife Beth, who also has a prominent role in law enforcement in the Bay Area, she was right there with him every step of the way, trying to figure out if this was indeed Dolores. And he obviously makes that call to Paul, and then it triggers a ton of notifications, and you got to hear all the different reactions in this episode from Dolores's other children. And then you're certainly something that I know stuck with both of us was the description of Paul driving up to Slick to tell him in person so that he could really explain it to him. Slick was, I think in his late 70s at that time, around 80 years old, and I got not in the best of health. How do I convey this incredible discovery to Dolores's younger brother, who like many, had probably given up hope that she would ever be discovered? So that was a really emotional element.
Yeah, no, I think hearing about what it meant to Slick that he gets to, be next to her in a cemetery certainly is an emotional high point in the whole series. Maybe, for some people that will be the emotional high point, hearing about what it'll mean to know that his final resting place will eventually be next to his sister. It was something that he had certainly doubted would be the case for over 4 decades, and hearing him even be able to joke about it, I was gonna give her a hard time for not telling us where she was. Like, very cool moment. And then I also thought it was interesting to hear some of like the other reactions, right? There's like a lot of praise and appreciation for what Kenny did, but there's also the other side of it, right? That her body was discovered 48 days after she went missing, about an hour away, one county over. It makes you question what happened. Why was this possible? Now, as we do, outline in the episode, there was no head attached to the body. There was no arms attached to the body. It wasn't a straightforward process to identify the remains, but that you were able to identify that it was a woman of 45, in her 40s, about the same height as Dolores, hair color, had given birth multiple times. There were a lot of boxes to check off that would have pointed towards Dolores if anyone would have tried to have made that comparison. So the fact that that never happened, and I know is something that has really bothered a lot of the family members, and they're all in different places on how to feel about that. But it really makes you question what happened, and I don't think we'll ever know for sure exactly why they weren't able to try to make a match there. But it is something that we tried to figure out in next episode. I know there are a lot of questions about what that process looked like. We'll get into that as much as we can in episode 8. So look forward to that, because again, you're kind of blown away by, hey, this should have been solved. Tom put it perfectly. This is something that should have been solved 40 years ago, and they're dealing with it now. If it raises questions about what would Carl's life have looked like facing justice, would he have been charged? All those things we'll get into. But yeah, I know when I heard the story, the first time I heard the story, and I found out that she was in such close proximity, both geographically and just from a time standpoint. You question really, and really Benicia Police and Solano County, why there wasn't more outreach, because we know from talking with Ron Heileman, the detective in Yolo County, that he consistently did as much as he could to make this case stand out to local law enforcement agencies.
Right, and that's what we're really going to get into. Like, this is definitely not the end. There's a lot more questions to be answered because of what you just outlined, Kyle, and we're going to get into that in episode 8, making sense of it all, which will be coming out here soon. Because, yeah, what was missed? What action could have been taken? Were there notifications made by others? And yeah, not to give too much away, yes, there were. Like, this could have been solved a little bit earlier and wasn't. So again, it's why this was a bittersweet moment for some, I would say most, in Dolores Wulff's family, because of the circumstances around her identification. So we'll get into that, making sense of it all. Episode 8 will be coming out in just a few days. Again, can't thank you enough for your continued support of the podcast. For Kyle, I'm Adam, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks.
Cool.
If you could just
Yeah,
edit
that
that
one
stumble
part.
out, that would
I'll
be
get that
great.
one part for
Yeah,
you.
sorry.
No, you're
Yeah, sorry,
fine.
I was rushing through a bit.
No.
Okay, I gotta run.
All right.
But that was good. I think we got
Yeah,
what we
we got
needed
through it.
there.
Yep.
I'll be around later
All right.
if we
I'll
need to follow
ship
up or
this off
anything.
to Aislinn and get it scheduled.
Perfect. Thanks, man.
All right. See ya.